Welcome guys. Today, we're about to explore the most horrifying black mamba attacks ever recorded. From a seasoned snake catcher who thought he'd seen every trick until one strike proved him wrong to a man who wandered too close to tall grass, unaware something was already tracking him. But first, we begin near an empty roadside where one quick stop would turn into a desperate fight against something faster than fear. It was the morning of the 11th of May 2016 in Limpopo, South Africa, and it was already burning hot. The countryside was wide open and dusty, full of perfect hiding spots that nobody ever thought to check, like inside hollow fence posts, behind broken down shacks, or in dark corners. Lisa Burch was 34 years old and worked as a farm advisor. Her job sent her to different farms every single day. She looked for problems, fixed what needed fixing, and moved on to the next stop. She was known for getting things done fast. On this morning, she was already running late and had one more job to finish before moving on: a broken gate on a farm that needed to be fixed. Her brother Ethan, 38, was already waiting for her at the next farm. That put more pressure on her. Lisa was the kind of person who pushed through when time was short. She had already skipped her safety checks earlier that morning just to save time. She was cutting corners to move faster. Honestly, I get it. When you're late, safety checks feel slow, but skipping them is never worth it. Before she got to the gate, a farmhand named Daniel Makona, 21, had already spotted something. Earlier that day, he had seen something moving near the post of that same gate and told Lisa about it directly. Everything about that morning was pointing towards something bad. The black mamba is one of the most dangerous snakes in the world. It can grow close to 14 feet long. It can move faster than most people can run, but its speed is not even the scariest thing about it. The poison is. When a black mamba bites, its poison goes straight to work on your nerves and muscles. It slowly shuts them down one by one, including the muscles you need to breathe. Without the right medicine and fast help from doctors, a single bite can deteriorate a person's health in as little as 20 to 30 minutes. One of the most frightening things about this snake is that the pain right after a bite is often very mild. The poison spreads through the body quietly, long before the person realizes how serious things are. Lisa crouched down at the gate and pushed her hand into the small dark hole where the hinge sat the tight opening between the gate and the post. A black mamba had been resting inside that space. When her hand went in, the snake struck. The bite was quick, and the fangs did not go in deep. Only a small amount of poison entered her hand. She pulled her hand back fast. It stung badly, but when she looked, she could barely see a mark. There was no deep cut or anything, so she quickly washed it and tried to convince herself she had just scraped a thorn or a piece of old wood. Still, her heart was racing and she felt uneasy, but she kept going anyway. I get why she brushed it off. I've had cuts and stings that look small also before, and I told myself it was nothing. But with a black mamba, nothing can turn life-threatening in minutes. Within 5 to 10 minutes of the first bite, her eyelids had started to feel heavy. Her vision was getting blurry. These were the first signs that the poison was moving through her body, small, easy-to-miss signs that most people wouldn't recognize. She ignored Daniel's warning again and reached back into the same opening. The black mamba struck a second time. This bite was very different. The fangs went deep into her wrist, and the second bite appeared far more serious. Lisa jumped up and moved quickly to her vehicle. Over the next 20 to 30 minutes, things got much worse. Her eyelids drooped down. Her words came out slow and quiet. She tried to start the car, but her fingers would not do what she needed them to do. She tried to call Ethan, but she could not speak clearly enough for anyone to understand her. Her breathing changed. It started fast, then got slower and more shallow with each breath as the poison reached the muscles that helped the lungs work. Without the right medicine and emergency help, without rapid anti-venom and respiratory support, her chances were extremely low. Her breathing muscles stopped working completely. Lisa Burch died because the poison from 2 black mamba bites shut down her ability to breathe, the second bite delivering enough poison that her body could not survive without treatment. A safety review was opened after her death, looking at how farms in the area handled dangerous animals. People who worked with Lisa said she was hardworking and always gave everything to her job. Daniel Makona spoke briefly to local media and said he only wished she had listened when he warned her that morning. No charges were filed. Lisa reached into the dark once, felt the warning, and reached in again. The next story takes us to the Eastern Cape, where a man named Ral Pulk walked alone into a locked school, shed certain he didn't need anyone's help. It was the 2nd of October 2017 in the Eastern Cape, South Africa. The school had been closed for some time, and out back sat an old shed that nobody had touched in years. The door was stiff. The inside was packed with old containers, broken furniture, and years of built-up junk pushed against every wall. There was barely enough space to move around, and almost no clear path to the door once you were inside. Ral Pulk was 42 years old and worked as a repair and clearing worker. He had been sent to the school that day to clean out the old shed so the space could be used again. Ral was known for wanting to handle things on his own. He liked working without help. To him, doing a job alone meant he was capable and reliable. Earlier that morning, the school's 5-year-old caretaker, Sibusiso Dlamini, had told Raoul to wait for backup before going into the shed. Sibusiso had a bad feeling that some kind of animal was hiding inside. However, the school coordinator, 5-1-year-old Clara Voss, wanted the shed cleared out by the end of the day. Raoul couldn't stop thinking about that deadline, which is why he went in anyway. Raoul went in anyway alone, and when he stepped inside, he pulled the shed door shut behind him to stop dust and debris from spreading outside. I actually remember a time when a friend told me not to go into an old shed because it looked unstable. I laughed it off and went in, then a plank fell right near me. Nothing serious happened, but it taught me that other people's instincts matter too. The inside of that shed was tight. Containers were stacked against the walls. Old equipment blocked the floor. There was no clear, open path to move through quickly. If anything went wrong, getting out fast would not be easy. Black Mamba does not chase people down. Most of the time, it wants nothing to do with humans. When it has space to move, it will use it. But take away that space, corner it, block its path, leave it with nowhere to go, and everything changes. A black mamba that feels trapped will strike fast, and it will strike more than once. It can bite several times in just a few seconds. Each bite can push more poison into the body, and that poison builds up quickly. The more poison that enters, the faster the body shuts down. That is what makes a cornered black mamba so deadly. It is not being aggressive. It is just trying to survive. But the end result for the person on the other side is the same. Ral began moving through the shed, pushing old items aside to clear a path. He reached a large container wedged against the wall and shifted it out of the way. Behind that container, pressed into the corner, was a black mamba. The moment Ral moved the container, the snake lost the tight space it had been using as cover. Its exit was gone. It was now trapped in the shed with him. The snake struck fast. It bit Ral on the lower leg one quick bite, then a second. At least one of those bites pushed a full load of poison into his body. Ral turned and moved toward the door, knocking into debris along the way before pushing it open and getting outside within seconds. He made it out, but the poison was already moving. Within 10 to 15 minutes, his vision started going blurry. His eyelids began to droop. He called out, but his voice came out quieter and more strained than normal. These were not signs of pain, they were signs of the poison shutting down his nervous system from the inside. And here's the worst part. He managed to get out of the shed, but there was nobody nearby to help him in time. His legs started giving out. He would stumble, steady himself for a moment, then stumble again. The weakness kept spreading upward through his body. He collapsed outside the shed as the paralysis moved through his arms, his chest, and the muscles that controlled his breathing. His breathing became shallow, then slower, then it stopped. Ral Pulk died from the poison of a black mamba bite. The snake had struck in self-defense after being trapped with no way to escape. Without anyone nearby to get him help in time, there was nothing that could be done. An investigation was opened following his death. Safety officials reviewed the working conditions and how the job had been set up that day. People who knew Raoul described him as a hard worker who always wanted to prove himself. His family was left devastated. No charges were filed, but the case raised serious questions about sending workers into unknown spaces alone and without proper checks. Raoul never made it past the front of that shed. In KwaZulu-Natal, Gina Gro had an entire group of people working right beside her when she crossed paths with the same snake, and it still made no difference at all. It was the 19th of March 2015, in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. A group of volunteers had gathered along a stretch of road to clear out overgrown grass and thick bushes. The grass was dense and grew close together, the kind where you could not see the ground underneath without pushing it apart first. Gina Gro was 29 years old and had signed up as a volunteer that morning to help clear the roadside vegetation. She was competitive by nature. She liked being the furthest ahead. She pushed into the denser sections of grass before anyone else in the group, regularly putting distance between herself and the people working around her. Marcel Kruger, 33, worked just behind her, trying to keep up. Earlier that morning, another volunteer named Lindiwe Kosa had spotted movement in the grass nearby and said something about it. The group noted it and moved on. Nobody slowed down. Nobody changed the way they were working. Gina kept pushing further ahead. A black mamba does not need to chase you. It just needs you to get close enough. It spends most of its time low to the ground, hidden inside thick grass or under low bushes. It sits completely still. It blends in. And if you step near it without knowing it is there, it will react before you even realize what happened. The bite itself is often the most misleading part. A quick sting, barely noticeable, easy to blame on a thorn or a sharp piece of dry grass. No swelling right away, no deep pain, nothing that tells you something is seriously wrong. But the poison has already started. It moves through the body quietly, targeting the nervous system, breaking down the signals that keep the muscles working. By the time a person starts to feel genuinely sick, the poison has already been spreading for several minutes. Gina stepped into a thick patch of grass ahead of the group. A black mamba was resting low in that same spot. As she moved through, the snake struck at her lower leg. The fangs made contact and released poison before the snake pulled back and disappeared into the grass. Gina felt a quick sting and stopped. She looked down, pushed the grass aside with her foot, and found nothing. No visible wound, no blood. But because she wanted to keep pushing forward, she kept moving. Her competitiveness is what stands out to me. Wanting to be the furthest ahead sounds harmless, but in this case, it put her exactly where the risk was the highest. 5 to 15 minutes after the bite, Gina's balance started to go. Her steps were no longer steady. She stumbled, kept going, stumbled again. Her eyes had trouble staying focused. She kept working, but was now moving more slowly without realizing it. Marcel caught up and immediately noticed something was wrong. Her words came out jumbled and slow. She tried to respond, but could not hold a sentence together. Her legs gave out, and she needed support just to stay upright. The group was far from the road. Getting her out was not quick. As they worked to move her, the weakness spread from her legs into her upper body. Her arms stopped responding. Her chest tightened. The muscles around her lungs weakened until they could no longer do their job. Gina Gro lost consciousness before the group reached help. She could not be saved. The poison from a single black mamba bite had moved through her entire body in under an hour. She had walked right over the snake and dismissed the only warning she ever got. Investigators looked into the safety preparation for the volunteer group and whether the earlier sighting of movement in the grass had been properly handled. Friends described Gina as someone who never backed down from a challenge and always gave more than what was asked of her. Her family asked publicly why no safety protocols had been put in place for volunteers working near areas with known wildlife activity. The case was reviewed, but no charges followed. This story makes me think about how slowing down can actually save you. She wanted to keep pushing forward, but sometimes the safest choice is to stay with the group. Gina moved ahead of everyone that morning, and it cost her everything. But the next story is different. Anika Dent was simply standing in her own backyard in Zimbabwe, working on a broken wall, when the same snake appeared from somewhere she never thought to look. It was the 7th of January 2018. On the outskirts of Harare, Zimbabwe. The backyard of the Dent home had a wall running along its edge, and that wall had started to crack. Pieces had already broken away from the structure, leaving gaps and small open spaces along its surface. Anika Dent was 37 years old. She and her husband, Paul, 40, had noticed the damage and decided to deal with it that day before things got worse. A neighbor named Tariro N-Cube 44 had pointed out the cracks sometime before and said the wall needed attention soon. That stayed with Anika. She did not want the damage to spread, so she got to work clearing debris and checking the broken sections from the bottom up. Paul was working nearby, lending a hand. The two of them kept their attention low, sticking close to the base of the wall and focusing only on what was right in front of them. They never bothered to check higher up, where the wider openings had formed. It didn't cross their minds that anything could be there. It was just a damaged wall in their own backyard. Nobody looked up. I've done this myself, focusing only on what's right in front of me. It's wild how often we forget to look up, even when the danger is literally hanging over us. Most people picture a black mamba on the ground, and yes, it spends time there. But a black mamba is completely comfortable at height. It climbs, it tucks itself into narrow ledges, broken walls, and tight spaces with no trouble at all. It can rest inside a small crack or cavity for hours without making a sound. You would never know it was there. When something comes too close or directly disturbs that hiding spot, the snake reacts fast, not to hunt, but to defend itself. And and only when it feels it has no space to escape. From elevation, that reaction can come downward in an instant, from a direction most people never think to watch. Anika was crouching near the base of the wall, clearing away loose, broken pieces. As she reached higher along the damaged section, her hand and arm moved closer to a narrow cavity above brushing near the opening and disturbing what was inside. A black mamba had been resting there along the ledge. Startled and confined within the tight space, the snake reacted immediately instead of slipping away. As Anika shifted position and straightened up slightly, her upper arm came within range. From its elevated position, the snake struck downward. The fangs drove into her upper arm. The contact lasted less than a second before the snake pulled back and retreated into the cavity. Anika stumbled back from the wall. Paul was right there and saw it happen. They moved indoors immediately and looked at the wound on her arm. The bite mark was small, two tiny puncture points sitting close together on her skin that gave no real sign of how serious the situation already was. Within 10 to 20 minutes, her eyelids began to droop. Her vision blurred. When she tried to speak, her words came out slow and difficult to follow. Paul moved to get help as fast as he could, but the poison was already spreading faster than help could arrive. Her ability to stand went first. She needed full support just to stay upright. The weakness moved through her legs, then into her arms, then reached her chest. Her hands stopped responding when Paul tried to hold them steady. The muscles around her lungs began to weaken, and each breath became harder and shallower than the one before it. Over the next 45 to 90 minutes, the paralysis took over completely. Anika Dent stopped breathing. She died from the poison of a single black mamba bite, one defensive strike from elevation lasting less than a second, and it was enough. An investigation was opened following her death and looked at emergency response times for residential areas on the outskirts of Harare. Investigators also questioned whether enough public awareness existed around wildlife entering damaged structures in neighborhoods bordering open land. People in the community described Anika as caring, dependable, and always on top of things around the home. Paul Dent spoke to local media in the days after and called for better public information about wildlife risks in areas where homes sit close to open land. Many people in the community said they had no idea a snake like that could be living inside a cracked backyard wall. The case drew wide attention across Zimbabwe. No criminal charges followed. How about you guys? What dangers in your own daily routine might be sitting just out of sight, waiting for the moment you stop paying attention? The next story keeps us with the same snake. She was out in the open fields of northern Botswana with her partner, and there had already been a clear sign sitting right on the path she chose to take. It was the 28th of August, 2016, in northern Botswana. The land was wide and open in most places, but along one stretch of the property, thick vegetation grew dense and low, forming a heavy wall of grass and bush that ran right up against flat, open ground. That border between the two, open on one side, thick cover on the other, was the exact path of the shortcut. Jade Kelch was 31 years old. She and her partner Stephen Hale were out that morning checking irrigation lines across the property. Getting to the next section meant either taking the longer route around or cutting directly along the edge of the vegetation. The property owner, Koos van der Merwe, had told them that morning to use the longer path. He knew that stretch of ground well and said the shortcut was not worth it. They took the shortcut anyway. A short distance in, they spotted a shed snakeskin lying in the grass directly on the path. It was dry and fully intact, the complete outline of a large snake left behind after it had grown a new layer of skin. A snake had moved through that same route recently enough to leave it there. They saw it. They kept walking. A shed skin alone is enough to creep me out. A black mamba does not move around randomly. It has familiar paths, areas it hunts, routes it uses regularly, zones it returns to. A shed skin left in a specific spot means the snake knows that area well and has been through it recently. This snake also favors the boundary between open ground and thick vegetation. That edge is where it hunts. It uses the dense cover to stay hidden while watching the open ground. When something steps into that boundary zone, pushing into the vegetation from the open side, it enters the exact space the snake treats as its own. If surprised at close range along its cover line, the snake may strike defensively before retreating. Entering its space is enough of a reason. Jade and Stephen moved along the edge of the vegetation. At one point, Jade stepped with one foot still on open ground and one foot pushing into the thick grass on the other side. A black mamba was in that vegetation. The moment her foot pressed into the cover, the snake struck at her lower leg. The fangs made contact, and the snake pulled back immediately into the dense brush. Jade reacted fast and moved away from the vegetation. Stephen stayed right beside her as they moved back toward open ground. Within 5 to 15 minutes, her vision started to change. Judging distance became difficult. Her steps turned unsteady, and she stumbled without warning. Stephen stayed close and tried to support her, but the weakness kept building. Her speech became strained and hard to follow. She needed Stephen holding her just to stay upright. The paralysis pushed upward through her body as the poison moved through her nervous system. Stephen had no way to get help fast enough. They were far from the road and far from medical care. The weakness reached her chest. The muscles that controlled her breathing stopped doing their job. Jade Kelch died from the poison of a single black mamba bite. She had a verbal warning from someone who knew the land. She had a physical sign on the path showing her exactly where the snake had been. Neither one was enough to make her stop. An investigation followed and looked at the safety conditions on the property and whether visitors had been given proper guidance before moving through the land. Koos van der Merwe cooperated fully with investigators and confirmed he had advised against using that path. Stephen was left deeply shaken by what happened and struggled to speak publicly about the events for several weeks after. Jade had every warning she needed and still walked into that grass. Shortcuts often feel harmless, but they're the exact places where risk hides. The longer path might feel inconvenient, but it's usually the safer one. Unlike Jade, who was out in the open in broad daylight with her partner beside her. The next story takes us somewhere completely different. Tabitha Gist was inside an abandoned building in rural Mozambique as the sun was going down with nothing but a flashlight cutting through the dark when something moved on the wall directly in front of her. It was the 12th of November 2017 in rural Mozambique. The sun was already low when the group arrived at the abandoned building, a structure that had been empty for years, its walls cracked and the inside completely dark. The only light in there was whatever you brought with you. Tabitha Gist was 35 years old. She and her friends were there to document the old building, recording details and capturing what was left of the structure. Tabitha was naturally curious. If something caught her attention, she moved toward it. That was simply how she worked. Before they went inside, her friend Anika Dent noticed something along one section of the outer wall, a cluster of insects gathered in one spot, moving around the same small area. Near the insects, there were also small signs of other life, faint droppings and quick darting movement along the cracks, the kind that suggested geckos or small rodents were feeding there. She pointed it out. The group noted it and moved on. Their other friend, Noel Ramirez, stayed outside to organize equipment. Tabitha and Amina headed in together, with Tabitha leading using a flashlight to cut through the dark. Curiosity drives us forward, but it also blinds us. Tabitha's instinct to move toward what caught her attention is what made her a good documenter, but in places like this, it's also what put her at risk. A black mamba that is actively hunting behaves very differently from one that is simply resting. When it is hunting, it is focused and positioned near its prey. It is still, quiet, and watching. Disturbing a hunting black mamba, especially inside a dark, enclosed space, triggers an immediate defensive reaction. The snake does not stop to figure out what is coming toward it. It only registers that something large is moving in its direction. A flashlight pointed directly at a black mamba in a dark room removes its cover and its ability to stay hidden. When a black mamba feels exposed with nowhere to go, it does not wait around. Tabitha moved through the building, scanning the walls with her flashlight. She reached a section of the interior wall where insect activity was visible. Small bugs gathered and moving in one area. She pointed the light directly at that section and leaned in for a closer look. The beam lit up a collapsed section of the wall where broken masonry and wooden beams had fallen inward, creating a narrow pocket of shadow and clutter. A black mamba was partially concealed within that debris, its body threaded through the gaps and angled toward the same area where small prey had been feeding. It wasn't out in the open, it was hidden within the structure, using the rubble as cover. The sudden light and closed movement disturbed the snake inside the rubble. The snake struck. The fangs drove into her forearm in a single fast strike before the snake pulled back and retreated deeper into the rubble, disappearing from the light. Tabitha reacted immediately, and she and Amina moved out of the building. Noel was right outside. They looked at her forearm and found 2 small puncture marks on the skin. Within 10 to 20 minutes, her speech began to slow down. Her eyes had trouble focusing. Amina and Noelle helped her move, but her coordination was already breaking down, her steps uneven, her balance difficult to hold. The weakness spread. Her arms became heavy and hard to control. Staying upright required full support from both friends. Her words dropped to almost nothing, short sounds that did not form sentences. The nearest medical help was far away. Getting out of the rural area took time they simply did not have. The paralysis reached her chest. The muscles that controlled her breathing gave out one by one. Tabitha Gist died from the poison of a single black mamba bite. The flashlight had guided her straight to the snake, and leaning forward had put her arm within range. In a dark, enclosed space with no way out for the snake, the whole thing was set in motion in less than a second. An inquiry was opened and looked at safety practices for the group and whether proper steps had been in place before entering an abandoned structure in a rural wildlife area. Her family called for clearer public guidelines around entering abandoned buildings in areas with known wildlife activity. No charges were filed. Tabitha walked into that building with a flashlight and her curiosity. The snake wasn't waiting for her. It was already positioned where prey activity had drawn it, hidden within the structure. She found exactly what she was looking for, just not in the way she expected. Thanks for checking out today's video. If you did like the video, go ahead and click that like button. Go ahead and subscribe. You're already here. Just do it. Saves us both time. I'll see you next video.